should operate things from here. It's super, super amazing. Wait until 3? Yeah.
2 minutes to add. The tension in the room. I can feel it. Very passionate.
Absolutely, yeah. So just remember that the cord is here. So if you want to go that way, don't trip yourself up. Okay, we'll get started. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm really delighted to welcome Mary Mandefield, who's here. And she's going to be talking about her newly released podcast, which started about in October, mid-October, called Noted. And some of our other passions, including her sort of route into the industry, as well as presenting on radio. And the reason I got in contact with Mary was because one of our alumni, Xanthi Palmer, got in touch to say she was working on this fab new project with a fab new presenter, and Mary is the presenter. Xanthi's not with us today. She's out skiving on holiday in the States. But it's great to see that our alumni are doing fantastic work and putting us in touch with fantastic people. So welcome, Mary, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Hello. Am I on? Yeah. Amazing. Hi, everyone. So good to see you. And thank you so much, Catherine, for having me and being part of Journalism Week. This is very exciting for me. I won't chat too much, and we've got plenty of time as well at the end for questions and stuff. So please, if anything kind of comes to mind as we're chatting, write it down and ask away at the end. I really do love questions. But I thought I'll give you a little intro into who I am, what I do and what I'm about. And I'm going to stand up because I was telling Catherine earlier, I get really restless. I can't sit down for too long. So even if you're sitting here now and you need to just shake your shoulders off or, fling your legs around a little bit, don't think it's distracting because I'm one of those people that gets restless. So my name is Mary Mandefield. I'm from Hertfordshire, which is just north of London. And I never really knew what I wanted to do when I was growing up. I used to watch a lot of programs where people would kind of like work in business. I don't know, I was watching like The Apprentice too much. And I just assumed I would be one of those people that wore a skirt suit and I would walk around town with a little briefcase and I would just be a business person. And then I got a little bit older and had different interests. I really like photography. I thought that I might be one of those people that goes off to like a war zone and takes photos. I was planning to study photography at university and my head of sixth form actually deleted my UCAS application, which was a bit weird at the time. And I think it was a miscommunication and a misunderstanding. But I feel like she didn't mean to, but she did me a massive favor because I don't think university was for me. Instead, I went traveling and I spent 4 years overseas in different countries, from Namibia to Kenya, South Africa, lived in France, spent some time in Spain. And then when it was time to come back, my parents asked, like, okay, come on, what are you actually going to do? I found myself applying to a job at Oxfam, and I'd never worked for a charity. I thought it was a really kind of like high barrier to entry, and everyone told me how hard it is to work for charities. But I thought I'll give it a go. I applied, I got the job, and I ended up kind of staying at charities, particularly humanitarian charities, for a good couple of years. And whilst I was there, I think I realized it kind of combined my passion of wanting to change things, wanting to help things where I could, and also communication. So I think working in charity is really interesting because you have these massive kind of global issues or big campaigns, but unless anyone knows about them, they don't really kind of have any impact. So there was in the comms team, you would have to make sure you were working with decision makers and journalists and news teams to make sure that that message kind of came across, and it came across in the way that made sense to the charity and made sense to the people at the heart of the stories as well. So I wasn't getting involved, but I was like on the sidelines. I was doing my little job over here, but I was like, this is very interesting. From that job, I ended up just kind of going to a lot of things, kind of speaking on panels or speaking at events, sometimes finding myself in crazy places. Like, why am I in the House of Parliament on a Wednesday evening talking about a campaign for women and girls? I don't know, but there I was at like 22, just pretending I knew what I was talking about. And I kind of carried on doing that for a while. It wasn't until lockdown, when I'd stopped working for charities, that I realized I had another itch that I wanted to scratch, which was in radio. And I had a couple of friends who worked in radio, and I had a bit of experience kind of in a radio company, but not actually presenting. I started out on a community station called Westside in West London and did my show, turned up every Tuesday, 9 till 11 p.m. And it took me an hour and a half to get home. So I was getting home quite late and then trying to either go to work the next day or do my thing. Completely unpaid, not much guidance, not much kind of broader help. But I carried on with it. And to make a very long story short, I had my eyes on a show on a national station that I wanted to do. On BBC Radio 1 Extra, they have a show called 1 Extra Talks. And because I was doing a talk show, I was like, yes, that would make the most sense for me to aim for way, way, way in the future. So I thought, what do I need to do? I need to find out who makes the show. So I found out the production company. I need to find out who's the best person to email. So I found the head of that company and I emailed them. And I was like, hey, I just do community radio at the moment, but one day I'd love to shadow, or I'd love to come in and just see how the show works, or even be a researcher on the show. I would love that. No response. Okay. Email again, same kind of thing. Oh, by the way, since I last emailed you, I've done a show about the Olympics, or I've done a show about refugee status at the moment. I've done this, I've done that. Please, can I just come in for half an hour and just sit in the corner? No response. I was like, okay, send another. Kept going. Until one day I got a phone call actually being, hey, Mary. I was like, oh my God, you've read my email finally. And they were like, are you free in 2 weeks' time? I was like, yeah, of course. Thinking, oh my God, I'm going to go and get to Shadow. And they were like, we need you to cover the show. And I was like, what? You haven't even let me in the door to even see. I'm like, what do you mean? And they were like, well, we've been listening to you on your local station and you've been doing really well and it fits and we know you can do a good job. So yeah, come on in 2 weeks and we'll do a show. I was like, okay. So I covered and then I did another cover and I did another cover. And then what they do in radio, you often have different covers, but sometimes with a show, they'll say, okay, this person is our official cover. So we'll always come to you first if we need you, if the normal presenter is on holiday or is sick. And so, yeah, after a couple of weeks, they were like, yeah, we want you as like the official cover. I was like, amazing. This is great. And it's kind of snowballed from there. I've done about 9 months on a BBC local station, so BBC Radio London, which has been incredible, especially to be in the same building as 1 Extra and Radio 1 and things like that. I've done some cover on Radio 1, so I did the Radio 1's Christmas cover presenter kind of competition. And took me 4 years of applying, but on the fourth go, they're like, yeah, come on in. And then after that, I managed to cover again. So they brought us back for a good couple of weeks. And that's been amazing. And most recently, I've started on Hits Radio, which is really, it's just so different. It is so different, but it's really exciting to be talking about music. It's Sunday breakfast, so it's a completely different kind of energy, waking people up. And the texts we get are literally people doing the most wholesome things. They're walking their dogs, they're at the gym, they're on their way to go on holiday. And that's what I love about it. So whether it is kind of doing bigger topics, like on 1 Extra Talks, we'll talk about everything from knife crime to county lines to, you know, like literally the coronation and what that means for Black communities. And then I'll be on Hits and I'm talking about Ed Sheeran and Pink. And I kind of like my Hannah Montana life. I feel like I get the best of both worlds. More within journalism, most recently I started working at the News Movement, which is a kind of startup news company focused for Gen Z audiences. And we really focus on TikTok, Instagram, and now we've just gone into the world of podcasting. So as Catherine mentioned, I now host a podcast called Noted, and that is produced by Persephonica, which are like an amazing production company, and they are behind some of the biggest podcasts at the moment, The News Agents, Political Currency that's just launched, and Dua Lipa's podcast as well. So again, balance. And sometimes that is just the world of journalism and media. It's being able to switch from the big, heavy stuff to the more light stuff, and make it feel seamless and make it feel accessible as well. So Podcast Noted is out now. We're about 6 episodes in. It is a learning curve, I'll tell you that for free. And we have a couple of clips to show you today, so you get a bit of an idea and a bit of a picture. Because even though podcasts are audio, we all know video is very, very important to kind of welcome in new listeners so they can get an idea of what they're going to listen to. Thank you. Okay, so just quickly before we play this one, we did an episode about Ozempic. Can I just have a raise of hands if anyone's heard of Ozempic? Oh, a few people. Basically, it's a diabetes drug, but people realize that if you take it, you can lose a dramatic amount of weight. There now is a worldwide shortage of it. It's crazy. It's kind of taken over Hollywood, taking over America, and it is going to be very, very popular here in the UK as well. It's very controversial, but we spoke to someone called Felicity. She's like a plus size advocate, influencer, and we're just talking about how beauty standards have kind of changed for women and how that feeds into weight loss drugs and what's going on at the moment.
The 1950s, when icons such as Marilyn Monroe were in the picture, and women were given essentially fat pills to gain weight. You then go to the 60s where you've got Twiggy, it was a very androgynous look, and then in the 70s, it was a very, very awful diet where anorexia became very, very popular. Then you go to the 90s when heroin chic was then popular. It is crazy to see how the last 100 years have influenced women in particular, and that goes for your family. Anyone in your family, your mum, your auntie, your grandma, will have dealt with these decades of body image trauma.
So that's Felicity there. I thought that was really interesting. I'd never really thought about that trauma, like dating all the way back, and it's still so prevalent today, but sometimes just in a different way. This was another episode we did with a guy called Farron Alex Paul, and he is so interesting. I really do urge you to check him out, especially if you're working on anything about knife violence and young people. This kind of came off the back of the murder of Eliane Andam, and I just, I live in South London, really not far from Croydon, where this happened like just a couple of weeks ago. And I don't know if anyone else just feels this feeling of hopelessness, and you're just like, not hopelessness, sorry, helplessness. You can't do anything. Like, you actually feel like you can't do anything. But the News Movement had already done an interview with him, and basically he has an initiative where he asks the young people in his community to hand their knives in, and in return he gives them vouchers to like JD Sports. And it's so interesting how he's kind of a link between young people handing their knives in, and then he can give the knives in to the police without there being repercussions for the young people who obviously just like wouldn't have gone to the police being like, I've got a knife, please take it. And he's like super passionate about what he does, super articulate. And I think just doing an episode on knife crime, we could have got a police officer in and telling us like the stats and telling us here's what needs to be done to change it. But actually, speaking to Farron, he's actually chatting with young people every single day, and he has them in his DMs. He's got like 100 and something thousand followers on Instagram. People come to him and they trust him. So that's why we interviewed him.
In person or online, what is the kind of general message that you're giving to someone who maybe is caught up in this, and it's either they're looking for a way out or they're already on that path?
There's so much more to life, and you do have choices. And as I said, man, I keep saying to people, listen, a rose can grow through soil and a rose can grow through concrete. You got choices. Like, don't let your environment dictate who you're going to be for the rest of your life. Do you understand that? Don't make that excuse. Yeah, some of the best lawyers, celebrities, they came from the same ghetto. Yeah, so don't make an excuse. You got a choice, use it. Mate, all it takes is 10 seconds and you'll be sitting in jail for 10 years. Yeah, but you don't realize that when you've never been exposed to jail treatment, when you've never been dragged through a whole court system and sat in jail on remand, when you've never had a stab wound that's gave you such bad nerve damage you can't use your arm again, you know, when you get stabbed in your belly and you can no longer use the toilet and you've got to use a colostomy bag, these are things that these children won't know until it's too late. But the thing about it is, once it's too late, it's too late. You can't return. You can't push rewind. Ain't a video game, man.
Yeah, round of applause for Farron and Felicity. Thank you. So yes, that is the podcast. It is kind of a deep dive documentary, but based on issues that are coming up week to week, and I think are kind of relevant to us, and maybe we're not seeing it kind of explained through other news outlets or through other podcasts. It's really interesting working on a podcast, and hopefully if any of you are interested in podcasting, you might have a question at the end, because it's very different to radio. That's what I'm learning. It's a completely different kind of, what's the word? Like, practice, skill, everything is completely different, even though it's just chatting, which I like to do. I'm going to shut up for a second. Catherine, over to you.
Well, Noted is really trying to get to, is trying to deliver news to Gen Z, and you're doing it through the medium of podcast because that's where the audience is, do you think?
It's interesting. There's different thoughts and different stats about podcasting and where kind of young people are. And I think ultimately, Gen Z is a lot of different people with a lot of different habits, a lot of different interests, a lot of different kind of, you know, what they want to do. And I do think podcasting is obviously still on the rise. There's still a lot of excitement around it. We haven't reached that point yet where I think we're like, okay, that's enough podcast. I'm sure some people will disagree. But I also found, you know, you can make something for a certain demographic. That doesn't mean it's only that demographic that's going to listen. I get messages from all different types of people. You know, it will be people in their 50s and their 60s who will say, oh my gosh, I really didn't know this was happening. And you're like, oh yeah, like you wouldn't, because there's not that kind of link to it. So yes, I think it is important to meet people where they are. And sometimes that's on TikTok, or sometimes that's things like this. Sometimes it's just having conversations. And I think, you know, hopefully the takeaway from the podcast is that something sticks with you that you then want to tell your friend about. And everything I do, I want to have an in-person impact. I know online is great. I know it's great for spreading messages and communicating. But if nothing changes in person, I really don't think there's any point. So even if you listen to it and then you go and see your friend for brunch and you tell them, did you know that there's a shortage of Ozempic and that's affecting people with diabetes? Like, that's what's kind of important for me and the producers as well.
And you talk about how you've kind of had this amazing start into the business, because a lot of people are, you know, we've got students here who are studying for a long time and trying to gain experience and trying to get their foot in the door. And actually, it's quite nice to be called up and said, would you like to present? So do you have any tips for our students who are obviously doing a slightly different route to you, maybe don't have the charmed life that you've had to start out with, but what can you tell them?
I'd say it's definitely not been charmed at all. Like, and I kind of tell the story in 10 minutes and I'm like, oh God, you didn't see when I had no money, you know, I was so tired, and like trying to go to work on these days after you've done a late night show, losing your voice, and, you know, reaching out to people, like trying to get guests on a show when no one knows who you are. It's just long. And I always say, to quote Gemma Collins, like, oh, this life's a long old slog. But it just depends what you want to do. And it is so possible. I've seen friends from all different types of backgrounds, all different types of levels actually achieve what they want to achieve in this industry, because they are very tenacious, they're very focused, and they don't try and do everything. And I think from the start with radio, I love music, but I'm not trying to be a music presenter, because there's so many people trying to be a music presenter. I was trying to be strategic of like, not that many people can do well thought out speech radio for young audiences. And then I go even more into a niche, young Black women, okay, in London, okay, with this kind of background knowledge or whatever. And so I was always quite focused of like, don't try and do everything, try and be really specific, and then more doors will open. So doing Radio 1 is incredible, but the show I cover on Radio 1 is Life Hacks, which is about giving advice, talking about social impact and social issues, which I wouldn't have been able to do if I'd just kind of been doing pop music, even though there's a lot of pop music. So then you have to learn how to talk about pop music. So I would say, like, advice is, you have to know yourself, and you have to actually know what you enjoy, what you're good at, what you have potential to get better at in. Be realistic. If you know like 1,000 people are going for this one thing, maybe look over the other way. There might be something else less glamorous, but is going to give you a platform, or is going to give you the skills and the knowledge you need. And be tenacious. I'm sure lots of people will tell you it's a tough industry. It's tough for sure, but it's very possible. But you have to have some kind of inner drive. And I think the inner drive comes from knowing who you are, what you want to do, and how you want to have an impact as well.
Tell us a bit more about the detail about Noted. So as presenter, how much of a say do you have in terms of the topics? Are you completely all on a level playing field when it comes to that? How far ahead do you research things, come up with ideas? Is there next Wednesday's episode, is that already in the bag? Is it already cut and edited?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting question. And the production kind of timeline is that we record on a Tuesday. Well, we basically come up with what we're going to do on Thursday, Friday. Then that gives us Thursday, Friday, Monday to reach out to people, to research, to come up with our script and our production plan. We record all day on a Tuesday, and then it goes off to be edited. We have sound design, and then I come into the office on a Wednesday. We'll decide what clips we want to use, and then last week's episode goes out that Wednesday. So we've recorded on Tuesday. That comes out the next Wednesday. So it's about a week in advance. So yesterday we recorded an episode about, oh my gosh, what did we do? Oh, because I can't remember, because I'm still thinking about last week's episode because I was still doing social clips for it. Then I'm thinking about this week's episode, which came out yesterday, which I was still doing social clips for. And then we're thinking about next week. So we're doing an episode about seasonal affective disorder. I went out to a park with my friend who's like a explorer for the North Face. He was talking about how he goes like ice climbing and mountaineering and stuff in the winter. He's super like outdoorsy. And then we spoke to people who live with seasonal affective disorder who are just like, I don't want to leave my house. I want to be warm and cozy all winter. And then we spoke to a psychologist who gave us some actual decent tips and understanding of why we feel like we do, and what we can do to kind of overcome it, or cope with it. And we actually spoke to the doctor who first came up with the term SAD in 1984. So he was a fun character, very zany. So it's a lot. And then, yesterday I kind of choose the social clips, think about what we're going to tweet about it, that kind of stuff. But always keeping an eye on past events. We did an episode on the Rwanda policy, and then I got a message today from the journalist who's covering it for the I paper saying the Supreme Court have told us when it's going to come out, the ruling, that's next Wednesday, so we need to talk about it. So you're always kind of thinking about so many topics at once, in the same way that something about Ozempic came up in the news yesterday, someone died from it in Australia. You're constantly kind of on it. Not just thinking of like the production schedule. And in terms of like who has a say, I think I'm in an interesting position as a journalist and as a presenter, because for a lot of podcasts, if you're just a presenter, you kind of turn up, get handed a script, and you need to just read the script, maybe put it into your own words. I'm in the newsroom for a lot of the week, so I'm kind of seeing what the other journalists are talking about, working on. And then we have one producer, one exec producer. We have an editorial sign off on the other side. So it's about 5 or 6 people kind of all in it. I don't have sign off. I don't have the final say. But I think that's good because I'm still very new to this. But yeah, big collaboration.
Are there some personal things that you would like to be covered in the next little while?
Yeah. And I think I'm constantly very aware that what I care about isn't necessarily what is always good for the news. And that's been a learning curve for me as a journalist of like, oh my God, I'm so passionate about this. But I'm like, you have to just kind of like weigh it up sometimes. In terms of like things that I do really want to do, I'm really interested in sustainable fashion. And that actually comes from working at Oxfam. So a little like side note of advice, when you graduate, or if you have already graduated, or, you know, if you're looking for work, yes, obviously it's great to go into those spaces where you want to work and the fields you want to work in, but don't be afraid to take other jobs if it's for a year or for 2 years, because you'll gain so much. Like, I have contacts from jobs that I did 6 or 7 years ago that had nothing to do with journalism, but they're so helpful now, and they've given me so much, like, more of an understanding and a perspective of the world. So yeah, I used to go to Batley in Yorkshire with Oxfam, because they've got this massive warehouse where all the clothes that don't get sold at charity shops end up. They put them on this conveyor belt, and there's just people there kind of choosing things. Finding designer items, finding wedding dresses, finding a sequin jacket that might sell really well at Glastonbury, and then they sort it all. And then other things get sold online. Things that can't get sold, they use for filling in car seats and things like that. I find that really interesting. So I want to do a story on what's the kind of journey of, like, the party dress that we might buy for Christmas. Sequins, it's like made of plastic. Lots of them are sold through fast fashion websites. Where do they end up? Do they end up in places like in Batley in this warehouse? And then what's the onward journey? So hopefully towards Christmas, we're going to do an episode on that.
I feel like that's a story we should be telling since it's on our doorstep.
Yeah, honestly.
Excellent.
If you ever get a chance to go, you should.
And I'm really interested in the clipping up for social. So you mentioned TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of that here as well. We have Yorkshire Voice platforms on all of those different platforms. And I'm just wondering to give, because we do have something called Mojo Week coming up, and we will be posting to all the Yorkshire Voice social platforms. So what approach would you take with TikTok versus Instagram, for example?
Oh, I would definitely say, like, I'm not the expert in this, but a lot of my colleagues at the News Movement are. They're a lot hotter on it. And that basically just comes from spending a lot of time on the platforms for work purpose, not just personal. But I would say certain platforms want more hope. Like Instagram wants a kind of like hopeful, positive news. You know, I'm sure you've all seen those kinds of pages that are like daily happy news or whatever. That stuff does really well on Instagram and on Facebook as well, if you're spending time over there. TikTok storytelling, grab people with a hook really quickly, and people are obviously sharing things in different ways. Like Instagram, you're kind of, oh, would that look good on my story? Whereas TikTok, it's more like, what's going to kind of loop me in, and then I want to come back to them. I want to come back to them in a week. I want to, you know, I don't know if anyone else kind of goes down these TikTok rabbit holes of someone who, what was that girl that found tadpoles in her garden? Did anyone see that? It was like 2 years ago, maybe. Anyway, she found like loads of tadpoles in her garden pond. And then she like followed the story of these tadpoles growing and the frogs then like taking over her garden. And you can't always do that with news. But I think on TikTok, people like to come back for an update. So if that's ever possible, like keep following up with things.
Okay. So what's next for you? What are you looking to do next?
Oh, I don't know. I think the podcast is kind of just, I feel like we're just getting started. Obviously, only like 5 or 6 weeks in. And I think, you know, it can take podcasts like a year to get into the flow of things and to understand like what their listeners want. And I think the more listeners I meet, the more I kind of get it as well. So just keep going with the podcast, keep growing a community. We have a WhatsApp number as well, which I quite enjoy. So if you've just listened, you can like send a voice note or just send a message and like share your thoughts. So maybe in the future, growing that into like a group, growing that into something. Radio, I just love doing radio. So I just want to do as much as possible. And I feel like you get better the more you do. I want to get into TV. So I'm currently talking to some people and that's like a long process. But, you know, whether that's documentary making or something different, but just figuring out, I guess, like where I fit in TV. And then lastly, I kind of run my own platform called Making Moves. And that is for people essentially who want to get into the media industry or are already working in the industry. I put on events. I'm going to be partnering with brands, and I write a weekly newsletter. And in there, I do like job opportunities. I do a bit of like behind the scenes. So I might do a few points of like things like today, or things like when I get called at 2 PM when I'm doing my shop in Aldi, and they're like, you need to be at BBC in a few hours because you're going to be covering this big story or whatever. I write kind of my insight on that, and I do trending topics. So if you're working on anything, whether it's your own YouTube channel or online magazine or TikTok or anything, and you're struggling for ideas in the moment, I kind of do a couple of things that are trending that week that you could just put into your own content. So yeah, making moves is a big focus.
On the screen
Get
for
it
you.
up. It's all
But,
good. I'll talk you through it, guys.
Yeah. Do you want me to pull it up for you?
If I can figure it out, I'll be impressed with myself. Is it there? And there. Amazing. So this is my website as well. If you ever want to get in contact, I am friendly. I don't bite. If you want advice or want me to connect you with someone, I think the joys of doing the job that I do is that I meet different types of people in the industry all the time. So if you're like, I really want to get into, I don't know, making TikToks for a news channel, like I might know someone. So you can just go on my website. You can always email me. And here as well is where you can sign up to Making Moves. Literally just email address, first name, last name. And I put all my like previous editions there. So I'll just show you a little example of what it looks like. This is like just Mary rambling on. I wanted to put a little bit in here about Israel and Gaza. Things about like looking after your own health as well, and what's kind of going on. Even Ricky from Newsround, I thought it was quite interesting, made a video for how parents can talk to their kids about it. And then I had a meetup that week, so it was a free meetup, and we literally just get together and chat and share ideas, places to be. So Sophia Smith-Gaylor, I'm sure you know of her, was hosting an event. Funding, things for Black History Month, things for TikTok, loads of stuff going on. And then this is where I do like jobs that are in the industry. So Kiss FM, Sky Sports, Britain's Got Talent, DJing workshops with Kiss, producer at Times Radio. And then look, Noted, that's what I've been banging on about. So I'll always give a reminder of what we've been talking about on Noted. And then here are the content ideas. So Disney's 100th anniversary, Pete Davidson had a surprise on SNL, and Mean Girls, the musical film coming out, you know, all the important hard-hitting stuff. So that is literally on my website, which is marymandefield.com. You'll find it there. Should I put the other screen back up? Is it here? There we go. Amazing. Thanks, everyone.
Lots of people have questions for you. So we're going to, Mark, are you going to help me with the mic then? Thank you.
Hi, Mary. Would applying for community radio or entering radio competitions would they be good ideas for those who are interested in becoming a radio presenter? If so, which one would be the better option?
What's your name?
Jacob.
Hey, Jacob. Great question. So I will say radio competitions are very few and far between now to get on air. KISS used to do one. Radio 1 have stopped doing theirs, or at least put it on pause for a little bit. So I wouldn't kind of hold your breath for those. But instead, think about how are they kind of taking people on. You definitely want to be looking at community radio stations for sure. I don't know, is there one at the university?
There's BCB, which we use, which is sort of just in Bradford, right next door. So we use
Amazing.
that.
BCB.
Well, actually, for my placement this year, I've applied for a couple of community radio stations. So I've applied for Rhubarb Radio in Wakefield, and hopefully when they release their placement, Harrogate Community Radio.
Yeah.
And also, I have entered a radio competition. I've entered one for Kerrang Radio. Have you ever heard of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've entered their competition every time they've done it, and I haven't got through.
Well, look, don't lose hope, because like I said, Radio 1 I applied lots of times. They sometimes just have so many people, and experience is always going to help you out. For anyone that wants to do radio, you'll hear it a lot, but your air miles are so important. And I used to roll my eyes at it a little bit, but it's so true. Because it's a job that is based a lot on just like your personality and being cheery, it doesn't mean it doesn't come without skill. So in the same way for anything else, if you want to be a football player, you have to go to training, you have to practice, you have to join a team, you have to go every week. It is exactly the same for radio. So keep knocking on doors for local stations. See if if that's not happening, online stations where it's not location specific. So you could do it from home, just buy a really cheap mic and get involved with like an online station, make your own podcast maybe, and make a demo. So have a demo that's about 2 to 3 minutes long that starts off really well, isn't just you saying, hey, my name is Jacob. It's like straight into something, an interview or a game or something interesting. Just clip that up, use something free like Audacity, put it on SoundCloud, and then you can use that to send out to people. And at the beginning, ask people for advice and don't just ask other presenters, ask producers. They'll be the best people to tell you how you can make your demo as good as possible, and that will lead to the next step of getting a show. Amazing, good luck.
Hi, Mary. My name's Alex. I was wondering if you could tell us more about Life Hacks, because it's one of my favorite shows on Radio 1.
Oh, I love that. Hi, Alex. I love it too. And I've loved it for ages. It used to be called The Surgery. And I used to listen to it when I was like 12 years old in my bedroom. And I just thought it was sick. So Life Hacks actually used to, Azanthi, who Catherine was talking about, used to be the assistant producer. So I applied for the competition and you had to be specific of what show you'd want to do. Life Hacks is their only real kind of like talk led and social issues led show. So I applied for that one. We did a practice day, and then we were live on the 1st of January this year, and we were driving the desk and everything. So no pressure. And I just say it's one of those shows, or if you're interested, I guess, in working in those kinds of shows in the future, the most valuable thing is your own life experience so that you can bounce off of things. So at the moment, Katie Thistleton, who hosts it, she's trained as a psychologist. So she's got so much she can like go off of. Vic Hope is, does so many things. She's really into her books. She's really into her charity work. So you can always like grab parts of your life for the show. And so I'd say if you're interested in kind of social issue led things in the future, make sure you're just doing things, volunteering, meeting people, maybe you've got your own little project going on, or even your own WhatsApp group with a community, because that will always kind of help you out. Does that answer your question? Fabulous. Thank you, Alex.
So my name's Theo. I just want to ask a little bit about what advice would you give to people wanting to start out, and where would they start?
For radio or for journalism? What kind of
For radio?
Radio. I guess similar to what I said to Jacob, of just getting a little bit of experience where you can make your own demo literally in your bedroom. I've used my phone before on voice memo just to make one. There's also so many programs now that you can use to enhance audio to make it sound like you're in a studio. Make a little demo and listen to as much radio as possible so you understand the different types of shows. There's so much in the UK that whether you're into politics or boxing or Ed Sheeran in particular, like you will find a station or a show that's really suited for that. So keep listening to radio, reach out to producers. A lot of them are on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and yeah, keep the focus of, I guess, what show you'd like to do. But to get started, you don't need to spend a lot of money. I know there's lots of things out there, especially like, obviously, if you're at uni, use as many facilities as you can. But I see things online of like a day course of how to be a radio presenter for £500. Don't do it. Like, you don't need to do that. Save yourself the money, and instead, like, reach out to people and see if you can get some guidance. Fabulous.
Hi, Mary. My name is Gabby. As someone who really wants to become a radio presenter in the future, I'm a little bit cautious because from what I've seen, a lot of people my age don't really tend to be using radio anymore. Do you think radio will slowly die out and it's almost a lost industry to go into?
Hi, Gabby. Really good question, and I get asked that a lot. In terms of the figures, I know we get things called radar, which is like the listening figures each quarter, and you can see some stations are just going up and up and up. It does fluctuate, it does change. I will say, I think things always come back around, especially when people are looking for nostalgia. So in lockdown, so many people turn to their radios just as community, comfort, company. The way that vinyl makes a comeback, cassette tapes make a comeback, DVDs will make a comeback. Radio hasn't really gone anywhere, but people really crave that kind of like analog, nostalgic feeling. And also, if you want to be a radio presenter, you will just have to test it out, see what the market looks like. but then being open to other things. Podcasting is kind of an arm off of it. Online shows, YouTube shows, even people who have growing TikTok channels almost talk as if they're on the radio, like keeping people company, but it might not necessarily be for a station. So being adaptable is really important. There's always job cuts in radio, and people just have to figure out where can they go that's like a good use of their skills. But I wouldn't worry about it too much. There's so many new radio stations popping up all the time that there must be listeners for them to make the money, for them to keep going. So best of luck. And yeah, there's definitely lots out there. No worries.
Hi, my name's Kate. Really, really enjoyed your talk there. Thank you. I love the fact that you've gone into it in a non-set pathway. It's really, really cool. I'm quite a bit older than probably quite a lot of the people in this room. And I was just wondering, because I'm looking at a career change, how you think age can affect things, because obviously you're going in, I'm not going to say how much older, but you're going in a bit older than everybody else. Obviously with that brings life experience, but I'm not stupid. It is, unfortunately, we live in a society which shouldn't be judgmental, but I think we all know that there is still judgment passed. What advice would you give for trying to, if you know, into trying to break into the industry as a bit older?
Hey, Kate, and thank you so much. And yeah, I hear you loud and clear. I guess I don't have lived experience. Like, I'm a bit older than my peers, a lot of my peers, who kind of came out of school or came out of uni and were like, I want to do radio and I know that's what I want to do. I started when I was about 26, which I still appreciate is quite young. I'd say there's jobs out there. Radio is always going to be in your advantage for the fact that, you know, we lose one of our senses there. Not to say it's a looks thing, but it's less discriminatory than TV for sure. So that's a bonus. Also, different types of shows and different types of stations require different types of life experience or maturity. For example, like Times Radio, I kind of went and had a chat and whatever. And I just thought, I'm not really right for Times Radio. I don't really think that's what the listeners want. But someone who's a bit more mature probably would be the right fit. So just looking for the right station, like youth stations, like Radio 1, Capital, KISS, will be very explicit. We are a youth station. It doesn't mean they don't have older presenters, but they're kind of telling everyone anyway. Whereas other stations, whether it's LBC or whether it's Times or whatever it is, as well as music stations, they know their listeners are older. So they obviously want to be able to relate to their presenters. But yeah, just be focused on what you want to do. And I think don't let you yourself be the blockage in it. Don't go into like meeting someone or emailing someone with that in your head. Just go as yourself, bring your skill set, bring your passion. And I'm sure they will see, you know, the environment where you might be best suited, but don't let it stop yourself because there's no reason for it. No worries.
I have been letting it stop me for the last
Yeah.
7 years, so thank you for that.
Work on it. And, you know, the sooner you just nip it in the bud. I did it for ages with journalism. Oh, I don't have an NCTJ. Oh, I don't. What? Someone will tell in certain scenarios, and I don't want to be here being like, I didn't go to uni, it's all fab. There's lots of things where people will say, Mary, you can't work on that. We can't, whatever. You don't know the media law. You don't know this. You don't know that. Okay, cool. You've told me that. So I'll go do something else. But why am I bringing that to the table when I could bring other things? So yeah, do what you can to kind of work on that and you'll be fine. Welcome.
Hi, Mary. My name's Abby. As a person who likes listening to radio and would like to be a radio presenter, maybe a podcast presenter, I'd just like to know how you come up with your ideas for your podcasts and things. Like, what's your thought process and stuff?
Hey, Abby. That sounds exciting. I will say for this podcast, there's loads of people involved, which is great. So we all kind of feed in. I'd say all of us have our, not ears to the ground, but like eyes up. So just everyday life, kind of making sure you're taking things in, you're talking to people, as well as like reading the news and being active online. But in terms of ideas for other projects, I try and take advice. I don't know if anyone here follows like Munya Chihuahua, like does comedy stuff on Instagram, TikTok, comedian. He said in an interview, like he just tries to have his headphones out as much as possible, whether he's on the train or the bus or walking around, takes his headphones off, and just listens out for things. You hear the funniest things. Spending time with kids, like just interesting kind of creative things, and don't think that all your creativity is going to come from your phone, because it will not. It comes from the world. And making sure like you have a life. I've got so many friends in radio who are like, I want to do radio, so that's all I'm going to do every day of the week, and when I'm not in the studio I'm going to be messaging people, and when I'm not doing that, you have to have a life, so you have things to talk about in the show. Pick up a new hobby, try pottery, try rowing, whatever it is, so that you have stuff to kind of talk about. And that always like leads to other things. So that's my focus at the moment, is just like have a life. And then that really helps. Thanks.
Yes, yeah, it's me again. I've just got another question. Do you think that local radio is in danger with the BBC cutting back on its local radio programs and with Bauer rebranding many stations as Greatest Hits Radio?
Hi, Jacob. Yeah, it's not. I can't say too much. I'm employed by lots of different people, to be honest. But I'll be real with you. The media landscape is always changing, especially now. It's going to see a real kind of quick curve, steep curve in people moving towards digital. And that's been a big factor behind changes in local radio. I can't say whether I agree or disagree. I think local radio is really important. Like you'll see, even last week when the storms and things were happening, I was driving through a storm. All I wanted was a local station to tell me like what roads are closed off. You know, should I be driving that evening? What's going on? What's going to be closed tomorrow? I think local radio is really, really important. I don't know how it will impact the bigger picture and communities. And it's really hard. Lots of people lose their jobs. Lots of things change, but I also think media has to change. So yeah, sorry, I don't have a very concise answer for you. Got someone over there. Oh, 1 second.
Do you hear that? Why do you think it's important to do volunteering work?
I don't necessarily think it's important to do volunteering. I think it's important to do volunteering for me. Do you mean like within radio or just in life? Oh, I don't necessarily think it's like a must. And I think obviously we've all got our own needs and we've all got our own passions. But personally, I've always volunteered, and I think I didn't even realize it. My mum was like a girl guide leader for like 20 something years. And I would have to go and help out with blooming rainbows and brownies and stuff every evening or every couple of weeks. We'd have to go help in the shop. I'd have to go help my dad with something. I do think it makes you a more interesting person, and you're always going to meet more people. And if you want to do a job where you're telling stories, you need to know interesting people and know other people's experiences. It's not every day we can get on a plane to the other side of the world to be like, how do the other half live? And that's not what I think volunteering is either, but at least you can get different perspectives in a kind of short space of time. But I don't necessarily think it's a must for everyone. I just like doing it. I like chatting, so yeah.
Hi, Mary. My name's Navita, and I'm a volunteer. Speaking of volunteers, I'm a volunteer radio presenter / reporter. Everybody's probably sick of me saying this, for Bravo Community Radio. And yesterday I was offered to shadow a radio presenter at BBC Radio Leeds. So can I turn this into a career opportunity, and how?
Ooh, from going into shadow?
Yeah.
Yeah, but don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just go in, be friendly, try and meet a couple of people, take a couple of names, connect with them on LinkedIn. Feel free to kind of tell them what your interests are or what your things are that you're passionate about at the moment. It might be that turns into a job opportunity. At the moment, jobs in local BBC stations are very scarce, but it might turn into something somewhere else. I will say people move a lot. So I used to be really focused on must make friends with Tom because Tom works at that station that I want to work at. 6 months later, Tom's gone. So then I'm like, oh no, he was my only link, but Tom's gone to another station. So you want to win over the person rather than the company. Just make some connections. Don't put too much pressure on it. There's a lot of people that I first connected with 3-4 years ago who have never offered me a job, but they're just really good people to know, even if it's just for advice. So I think less about this will be my next job, more about who can I meet there? How can I make a good impression? And maybe focus on just being asked to come back. Maybe they'll have a freelance shift or an event they want you to help with, and just make that clear. I'd love to help out in your next event. Think about what's coming up. Christmas lights will be turning on, carols singing, something might be happening for the new year, the Great North Run, all those kinds of things. Just think about that and be like, I'll be available. Would love to get involved. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I wish we could bottle your energy and like sell it or something. 'Cause
I
it's
want the money.
fantastic. Fantastic. Can we thank Mary, please? Next, we're sticking with podcasts, and our next presenter at 4 o'clock is going to be Karen Pearson, Queen of Podcast. So please come back for that.